So two things I commonly hear. God is way behind the times, and the Bible is a boring, outdated, barbaric book. And see, I think what lots of people are saying when they say things like this is, oh yeah, I know all about Christianity. I know what it means to be Christian. I have to tell you all the people that I hate, all the things I stand against. I have to start drawing lines because apparently I'm the one who gets to decide who's in and who's out of the club. No thanks, not interested. And the Bible, oh my goodness, how can you stomach it? Is it true? And I think Jesus is shouting to his people, I don't want your faith practices to put you in categories. I want your faith to compel you to make the world a better place. I want your faith to inspire you to help put a little bit of the world back together. And yes, it's true. Sometimes religions are pulling us and inviting us forward. And other times, religions are resistant to this invitation. They're resistant to God's healing work in the world. But I am still convinced God is working ahead of us, always working ahead of us. And the Bible is lots of things, but boring and outdated isn't one of them. Shall we look at a Bible verse together? Exodus chapter 21, verse 24. Most of you are familiar with this verse, and even if you're not familiar with this verse, you're familiar with the first part of this phrase. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a hand for a hand, a foot for a foot. And some of you are saying right now, see, that's exactly what I'm talking about. You see how outdated God is? Do you see how barbaric and backwards this is? Give me Gandhi's quote. That's the one I like better. An eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind. Do you see how backwards it is? See? Now, what if we put some context to this verse? What if we find out where it comes from? Like, what if we learned that the chapter this verse comes from is a chapter that deals with issues around personal property, personal injury, and property damage. And in this chapter, it includes instructions for what to do if there's a kidnapping. And it includes the importance of defining, was this property damage, was it done intentionally or was it by accident? And if a fist fight breaks out, and I hit you hard enough not to kill you, but I hit you so hard that you're bedridden for a few days, well, what do we do then? What's the proper compensation? And if I dig a hole and your animal falls into that hole and that animal is injured, well, what's the appropriate way forward? What are the procedures? And it all sounds so ancient and distant, doesn't it? Until, of course, you find yourself sick at home one day and you're lying on the couch and you start flipping through daytime TV. And you come across shows like Cops and then Judge Judy. And what do all the judge shows have in common? Personal injury and property damage. Eye for an eye. This was radical forward thinking for these people in their day. And we have to remember to keep the text as we bring it into our world. We have to remember to keep it in the ancient world, the world in which it comes out of. Eye for an eye. It was another way of saying the punishment must fit the crime. It was a law given to lessen violence, to lessen revenge. Because we know how revenge works, don't we? Revenge always escalates. If you get me, I will get you back, and I will get you back harder. And see, this passage comes along and says, wait a minute. If your cow dies, you're owed a cow, not two cows and a goat. If we get in a fist fight and I hurt you bad enough to where you're bedridden, well, then we need to figure out the proper compensation. But you can't then get out of bed and go kill that person's entire family. If your property is damaged, then we need to figure out what's the appropriate way forward and was it done intentionally. But you can't then go and burn down that person's fields in their household. So what we have here is a God who is meeting real people in a real time, in a real place, because God always meets real people in a real time, in a real place, and God is always pulling us forward towards things like peace, healing, wholeness, and well-being. Now, if we fast forward a few hundred years to the time of Jesus, this verse that was actually intended to create justice and lessen violence and lessen revenge was, by the time of Jesus' day, being used to justify what? Violence and revenge. So here's what Jesus says in Matthew's gospel, in a place called the Beatitudes. Matthew chapter 5. You've heard that it was said, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist an evildoer. But if anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other also. And if anyone... Oh, I lost myself. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your coat, give your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go also the 2nd mile. Now, if we can just keep that screen up for a while. You have probably heard this passage read and interpreted and used in the most unhelpful, even harmful ways. It has been used to tell victims of domestic violence to just keep putting up with the beatings and turn the other cheek. It has been used to tell those who've been harmed by structures of racism to just keep enduring this system. Walk the 2nd mile. It has been used to tell the little boy who's being bullied in school to just put his head down, put his hands in his pocket, and keep on walking and don't say anything. And we could even see it used in softer ways that I still think are unhelpful. Oh, if you turn the other cheek, you'll get some extra brownie points in heaven. Oh, go that extra mile because it's a real character builder. And let's just be honest. That is not peace. That is not justice. That is stupid and immoral. It upholds a system that hurts people. And I happen to believe Jesus was not stupid and immoral. Jesus' audience here, they were people living in the system of the Roman Empire. Remember, we're in the 1st century Greco-Roman world, the world of the Roman Empire. They were people who had no power, and they were people who knew what it was like to be constantly humiliated by those in power. And so here Jesus comes, inspiring the moral imagination, telling them to be creative. He provides 3 examples about what it looks like to resist a way of being that robs human dignity. Because this text, this scripture, is about the refusal of going along with something that treats anyone as less than human. Are y'all hearing that? This scripture is about the refusal to go along with anything, a system, a way of life that treats anyone as less than human. So the first example. Verse 39, but if anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other cheek also. Now it's important to know, in the 1st century Greco-Roman world, the most humiliating thing you could do to someone would be to give them the backhand slap. We have examples of masters doing this to slaves, men doing this to women, Romans doing this to Jews. Why would Jesus say to already suffering people to turn the other cheek? And for this, I need a volunteer. An adult volunteer, to be specific. My boy, Eric. Oh, man, I messed up on this one. Hey, let's just go ahead and pick the biggest guy in the room. And so I should keep you down there, but let's bring you up on the stage here. Oh, man, y'all are going to see why this is going to backfire. Okay. Now, there's a couple things we need to know about the 1st century Greco-Roman world. If I am the Roman, particularly the Roman soldier, and Eric here is the lesser Jew. Yes, if you could get on your knees. There's a couple of things I would never do. First, I would never hit Eric with a closed fist, because that would mean he's my equal, and he, of course, is not my equal. Also, and why that's important is because that would be invoking a fist fight, and this isn't a fist fight, this is an insult. And I don't want to pick a fist fight with this guy. Another thing I wouldn't do, I would never hit him with my left hand, because as you know, the left hand was the hand used for unclean tasks only. And I'll let you all figure out what those unclean tasks are. So, if the text is telling us, if anyone is to strike you on the right cheek, turn also the other. Jesus says for him to do this. So if I strike Eric, point to your right cheek, just so everyone, okay. So if I backhand Eric on the right cheek, Jesus tells him to turn the other cheek. What is Jesus doing here? Okay, think about it. I can't then hit Eric with my closed fist, because he's not my equal. I would never stoop to that level. I can't hit him, I can't backhand him with my left hand. Oh, who would stoop that low? I don't want to be that unclean. He's turned the other cheek. He has forced me, the Roman soldier, to walk away in confusion. Thank you, Eric. Yeah, we can give him a round of applause for that. Why does Jesus say to turn the other cheek? Because you are robbing the oppressor the power to humiliate. You are in a very real sense saying, your first blow didn't work. Try again. You cannot take my dignity. Second example. If someone sues you and takes you to court, and they want your coat, give them your cloak as well. Another way to interpret this, if someone sues you and takes you to court, and they want your outer garment, give them your undergarment as well. If they sue you and take you to court, and they want your pants, give them your underwear as well. Now, why would Jesus say this to an already humiliated people? This sounds humiliating. It sounds degrading. Keep in mind, this example is set in the courtroom setting. And this example is all too familiar to Jesus' hearers. The debtor has sunk even deeper into poverty. The debt can't be repaid, and his creditor has now summoned him to court. And only the poorest of the poor would have only their undergarments left to give. So why does Jesus say this? Think about what this would be doing. You're standing in the court, and all of a sudden you strip buck naked, and then you stand there. What do y'all want next? You want my clothes? Take them. You've taken everything from me. The only thing left is my life. You want that too? Shaming an unjust system, exposing it for what it is. In ancient Judaism, nakedness was taboo. Do you remember a story from Genesis chapter 9 where Noah was on a boat because of the flood, and then Noah gets off the boat and does what some of you might do. He decides to get drunk and naked. Noah passes out naked because he's drunk. His sons walk into the room and they see Noah. Noah wakes up from his drunkenness. Who has the shame? Not Noah. The text tells us it's the sons who saw the nakedness. So when you're standing in the court, buck naked, you are shaming all those looking at you. You are exposing a system, and it's not just about shaming people, because I actually don't believe Jesus works in those ways. But rather, it's about loving them enough to show them a better way, loving yourself enough to live a better way. And it's no surprise that the very next text after this one is about Jesus telling us to love our enemies. You've heard it said to love your neighbor, but I say to you, love your enemy. Pray for those who persecute you. Third example. If you're forced to go 1 mile, go also the second mile. Why is Jesus saying this? Already tired, humiliated people. This example is drawn from the Greco-Roman world of laws that limit the amount of forced labor that the Roman could impose upon his subjects. And by law, the Roman soldier could only force the subject to walk 1 mile with his pack. To do more would be violation of the law. So do you see what's happening here? Why would Jesus say, keep walking? Because it's about empowering them to restore and keep their human dignity. What's the Roman soldier to do? Violate the law? Then be reprimanded? And do you see the humor in it all? I mean, can you imagine a Roman soldier on that 2nd mile saying to the poor Jew, come on, man, give me my pack back. No, I'm good. Come on, man, give me my pack back. Give me my pack back. You're going to get me in trouble. No, I'm good. I mean, do you see how this is all working? Give me an amen. Give me a head nod. All right. What does all of this have to do with us? Jesus here is talking about a third way. How often does culture tell us there are only 2 options here? You can either do nothing, which we know causes despair. Doing nothing produces despair. Or you could do something that is equally harmful, equally offensive. And we know when we do that, we just keep the violence and the injustice in circulation. We know that doing something equal is what Walter Wink describes as the myth of redemptive violence. The myth of redemptive violence says, healing and redemption and peace will come only after I can violently exterminate the enemy. And by the way, if you're interested in all of this third way stuff and the myth of redemptive violence, I highly, highly, highly recommend to you this book called Engaging the Powers. It's by Walter Wink. Walter Wink, this is a classic in the field. He is a major player when it came to the development of what is called the third way. This is actually part of a trilogy. The first 2 are called Naming the Powers, and then the second book is called Unmasking the Powers, and then this is the third, Engaging the Powers. And I highly recommend it because he goes deep into the myth of redemptive violence and deep into the third way. And what he does is he traces this myth of redemptive violence all the way back to the Mesopotamian era, to around 1250 BC, with the creation story, the Babylonian creation story of the Enuma Elish, where you had life, creation coming up out of the violent extermination of the other. And then he brings it all the way into our world and says, think about the cartoons that you and I grew up with. I mean, it's the same story. How are heroes produced? Evil enters the story. How do you get rid of the evil? You violently exterminate, and that person or those people then become the hero. And I think Jesus says, yeah, man, I get all that. I get it. And I'm telling you, there is a better way to live. The story is better than this. And what does this all have to do with you and me and Desmond Doss from Hacksaw Ridge? How many of us are hungry for a third way? Have you been wronged or betrayed? And see, what we're told is there's only 2 options here. Oh, you can either walk away and do nothing, or you can get revenge. You can get them back. And I don't know about you, but when I get hurt, I want to get the person back. I want to get them back, and it's not just getting them back. I want it to hurt a little more than they hurt me. And I buy into the myth of redemptive violence all the time. If I can get them back, maybe I can then find my healing and the peace and the redemption. See, I need a third way. And how many of us are hungry for a third way? Because we turn on the news and we see another terrorist attack. Or we see religious people in our own community standing on the necks of the most vulnerable in our community. Or we hear the story of a death row inmate Oh, I love the myth of redemptive violence. Put them to death. Kill them. Get rid of them. Because when we do this, then we'll find our peace and our healing and our redemption. There's only two options here. And how many times are we told by political leaders there's two options here? Oh, whose side are you on? Let me know the category so I know who to hate. Man, we need a third way, don't we? Desmond Doss needed a third way. You know, in one of the opening scenes of the movie, it's of Desmond Doss as a child, and he picks up this brick. He's in a fight with his little brother, and he hits his brother with this brick, and it almost kills him. And see, Desmond Doss is surrounded by violence with an alcoholic father, but he also grew up in the church and was exposed to the teachings and the way of Jesus. And so all these things come together to form and shape him. And he makes the decision that his life will not be about taking life, but it will be about saving life. And so he joins the army as a combat medic. And he goes into the Battle of Okinawa, where there were seemingly two options. You either kill or be killed. And Doss creates a third way. And he saved 75 men on Hacksaw Ridge without ever having picked up a weapon. And see, I don't think this passage from Matthew's Gospel, I don't think it's just about violence and nonviolent resistance. I don't think it's just about the relationship between the oppressed and the oppressor. I think it's bigger than that. I think it points to all the times we fail in our moral imagination. All the times we buy into the lie that there's two ways. All the times we fail to create a third way. I think it points to a God who is always pulling us forward so that we might help put a little bit of the world back together. Check out this scene. If that's not third way thinking, I don't know what is. While everyone else is taking life, I'm going to be saving it. With the world so set on tearing itself apart, doesn't seem like such a bad thing to me to want to put a little bit of it back together.